let's continue now talking about the frame, and let's push a little deeper into this subject and take a look now beyond the effect of content. What are we doing with composition? Of course, these two things are interrelated. Let's get going. Orientation. What does that mean? Well, let me think about that for a second. Orientation means orienting yourself in relationship to your camera and your camera in relationship to the thing that you're photographing. And that orientation can be something that is very natural to you. That means just simply picking the camera up and holding it like this, and bingo, there's your picture. Well, we've seen already how that can be a good thing to do. It can be the only way, actually taking a normal vantage point and a normal framing to make the picture that you want. But the normal orientation is usually horizontal. So one of the things you can do right away to shake up your framing is to make a picture that's a vertical. And some cameras, like this one, have a button where your finger can rest nice and easily here and raise it up and make a picture from that vantage point as well in that framing. So if you're accustomed to just simply framing all of your scenes horizontally, one of the first things I would do would be to just start framing things vertically. One of the reasons that we so often raise the camera to our eye and fix it in a horizontal position, horizontal orientation, is that we live pretty much in a horizontal world. These visitors to the Photographer's Gallery in London, England, are viewing works by the artist Edward Burtynsky. Now, Burtynsky's famed for his large format photographs of contemporary landscape scenes. And he may have made a vertical picture in his career, but believe me, I can't remember a single one. Why is it that so many of our photographs are in what we call the landscape mode? Here's a work by the artist Santiago Serra in an exhibit that was organized by Autograph ABP at Rivington Place in London. It's a great place to visit if you're in London, by the way. It's also, like the majority of works that we've seen and like the individual components of this piece, a horizontal picture. One reason for this preference for viewing the world horizontally and for lining up a team horizontally, as we see in the background behind this strange creature, is that just like this little finger puppet, most of us are blessed with two eyes to see the world around us. And there's a left eye and there's a right eye. We don't have a top eye and a bottom eye. Do not underestimate the importance of the physical nature of our normal way of viewing the world in having an impact on the ways that you may feel comfortable and inclined to frame your photographs. Another strong motivator for creating horizontal framing, something that's pushing us in that direction, is the overwhelming horizontal image environment that we live in, at least most of us live in this digital age, every day. When was the last time that you sat down to watch a video on a vertical screen? How's the monitor for your computer set? Well, probably in landscape mode. Is it set as a vertical? That would be very strange. There are certainly vertical aspects to contemporary life, and it would be foolish to ignore them, and foolish to ignore the influence that they have on what we feel is natural as a choice of framing for our pictures. If you look at the world of magazines, the world of books, the world of many things that are printed, things that relate to the written word, maybe like a greeting card, for example, or the paper that I was using when I wrote up the script for this lecture, you'll find that it is vertical in format. Now, why is that? Well, I'm not sure. There's a tradition in that regard, but next time you go to the store and you're walking down the grocery aisle and getting ready to check out, take a look at the magazine rack and see if you can count one horizontally oriented magazine. Probably not. The advent of the tablet is another thing that is a vertically motivating factor in our world, kind of challenging that horizontal orientation. I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at a tablet that I'm trying to interact with using that touch screen, I find that it's much more convenient for me to hold it vertically like this. And of course, here I am looking at my website, and you're welcome to go also and take a look, www.peterglendenning.com. That's not an advertisement. Whether you're holding your frame horizontally or you're holding your frame vertically, there's something that we call level. And level is based on a sense of gravity and our everyday experience of that force of nature. Things are either balanced in terms of what gravity would force them to be, up and down, or they're about to topple over. So whether that frame is horizontal or that frame is vertical, when it is what we call skewed, S-K-E-W-E-D, well, that sort of means we're defying gravity. Your approach to composition really is something that you need to take into account in that regard. When you skew your vantage point, you're going to find that diagonal lines become very, very important in terms of the ultimate design of your picture, the layout of your composition. How are those diagonal lines going to lead your viewer in a very active manner, actually, from one place to another across the picture plane? Whether that picture is vertical, as in this one, or horizontal now, those vertical lines, that sense of being skewed, that's something important for you to consider in designing your picture. I discovered this glass wall in Bradford, England, right near the Museum of Media and Imaging, used to be called the Photography Museum in the UK. And this glass wall had these very interesting frosted glass circles etched into it. And it gave that wall a character. It also alerted the pedestrians that the wall was there. It was so beautifully clean and clear that it would have been easy to walk into. Well, I found it an intriguing landscape element that I could try to see from a variety of vantage points and kind of work the scene and see what I could find, and maybe something interesting might emerge. So here's a vertical composition that can be seen to transform that circle into a visual element that relates and maybe competes with the clouds in the sky. Here, I simply turned around and look at another aspect of the wall. I'm looking at the glass from another direction, and now the clouds are reflected in that glass, and the building behind it through the glass can also be seen. So they really all blend together now in a horizontal framing. Waiting for just the right moment, in this other section of the glass wall, in this instance, the whole wall was frosted except for little circles that weren't, that you could see through. I waited for two pedestrians to pass by, walking just behind that wall into those circular clear spots, and I found an opportunity to make a picture that's very much about symmetry. And looking at that horizontal framing, this is the way I needed to accomplish my arrangement of elements, to have equal amounts of similar visual material on the left and the right to create that symmetrical composition. Asymmetry, on the other hand, again using that same frosted glass wall, is quite a different strategy for composition. Well, again, we'll go into composition much further later on, but it's good to raise that point over and over again. Asymmetry means there's about 1/3 or so of the picture that has one kind of content, and about 2/3 of the picture that has another kind of content, and you can see that following through here in this photograph. It feels balanced because there's visual weight, there's visual interest in the glass wall, and there's also visual weight, there's visual interest in the space beyond the wall, and both of them balance each other out fairly well to most people. In terms of composition, that frame that we choose also can result in frames within the frame. And those frames within the frame are certainly compositional elements that we'll want to examine and work with very carefully. In this instance, I was in the Detroit airport looking out a window through some spurts of water that were jumping up and bouncing around in the foreground from a fountain. And I found that by taking this vantage point and this framing, I could enclose a fragment of that Boeing 747 and the horizontal and the diagonal and the vertical lines could all come together into a composition that seemed balanced. We can get to the point where our framing is such that rather than documenting the object well, or the person well, or the place well, we're creating a picture that now comes springing entirely out of our creative innards, and using that frame to finally isolate an abstraction. Even when parts of the scene are somewhat recognizable, we can walk a fine line, almost like a person on a tightrope, kind of balancing themselves so they don't fall off on the left or the right, between documenting the thing and creating an abstraction. And in this photograph of thatched roofs at a resort in Mexico, I think I was fairly successful in doing that, trying to create a frame that would isolate elements that could be at once about the abstract and at once about the real. Another aspect that's come more and more to the fore with the advent of digital photography is making panoramics, making frames that in their proportions are tremendously different from what the norm was. In the olden days, photographing with, say, 35mm film, to make a panoramic, we would probably need to have a specialized camera that would shoot panoramics, or we would shoot individual pictures and print them together. And of course today, it's commonplace with smartphones and other devices to be able to make a beautiful sweeping panoramic image. Well, what if the composition that you're creating is something like this one, maybe 20 meters long and 1 meter high? How does your framing affect that kind of picture? Very important question for us in digital photography today. The ease with which we can make these panoramics is like this photograph I made at Baker Street in London, something I would never have thought of making 10, 15 years ago when I visited London as I did. But today, with a smartphone, with a compact digital camera, for example, very simple matter to switch to that panoramic mode, and then thinking about how that frame for your panorama is going to enclose different facts, different compositional elements. Very, very critical to us as we work forward in this digital age. So what we're thinking about here is how the frame is so significant in isolating very, very specific elements. And it's that specificity of the frame that results from a choice that you make, and it's a very specific choice that you make that you need to be constantly aware of, that will result in decisions that are going to lead you to either compositional success or compositional failure based on that singular element of the frame itself.